on the GOP's bill to repeal and replace Obamacare. We've got the very latest from Capitol Hill for you. But our breaking news tonight, CNN learning new details on the FBI investigation into potential links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government. Pamela Brown, Shimon Prokupecz, they join me now. They broke the story along with our justice correspondent, Evan Perez. Pamela, you first. What are you learning?
Well, Don, we've learned the FBI has information, intelligence that indicates associates of President Donald Trump communicated with suspected Russian operatives to possibly coordinate the release of information damaging to Hillary Clinton's campaign, according to U.S. officials we've spoken with. Now, as you'll recall, FBI Director James Comey made his bombshell announcement Monday before Congress that the FBI is investigating the Trump campaign's ties to Russia. So the FBI is now reviewing the information it's gathered in this investigation, which includes human intelligence, travel, business, and phone records, and accounts of in-person meetings, according to these officials. So the information raised suspicions of FBI counterintelligence investigators that the coordination may have taken place, though officials we've spoken with cautioned that this information is not conclusive and that the investigation is ongoing. The FBI would not comment, nor would the White House, though Trump officials have denied there was any evidence of collusion, Don.
Shimon, this gives us really more insight into what Comey knew when he spoke on Monday at those hearings.
Well, that's exactly right, Don. If you recall, in addition to Comey saying the investigations include looking at connections to Trump associates, he also explained what it means that the investigation is being done. Take a listen.
Don't you need some action or some information besides just attending a meeting, having been paid to attend a conference, that a picture was taken, or that you traveled to a country before you're open to investigation for counterintelligence by the FBI?
The standard is, I think there's a couple different at play, a credible allegation of wrongdoing or a reasonable basis to believe that an American may be acting as an agent of a foreign power.
Well, that's right. And one law enforcement official said the information in hand suggests, quote, people connected to the campaign were in contact, and it appeared they were giving the thumbs up to release information when it was ready, end quote. But other U.S. officials who spoke to CNN say it's premature to draw that inference from the information gathered so far, since it's largely circumstantial. The FBI cannot yet prove that collusion took place, but the information suggesting collusion is now a large focus of the investigation, these officials told us.
All right. Pamela Brown, what sort of coordination is under investigation here?
Well, mostly, Don, the FBI is focused on the stolen and published emails starting last July by WikiLeaks, including the DNC and Clinton campaign's John Podesta, his emails as well that were released through WikiLeaks. So U.S. officials said that the information being investigated was not drawn from the leaked dossier of unverified information compiled by a former British intelligence official that was compiled for Trump's political opponents, though the dossier also suggested coordination between Trump campaign associates and Russian operatives, Don.
So, Shimon, do we know exactly who is being investigated?
So our sources would not say who connected to the Trump campaign was being investigated, but we do know the FBI has already been investigating 4 former Trump campaign associates. And you'll remember some of these people: Michael Flynn, Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, and Carter Page. We've done a lot of reporting on these individuals, and some of the scrutiny around them that's going on now at the FBI is for their contacts with Russians known to U.S. intelligence. All 4 have denied improper contacts. Don, one of the obstacles the sources say the FBI now faces in finding conclusive intelligence is that communications between Trump associates and Russians have ceased in recent months, given the public focus on Russia's ties to the Trump campaign and some of the reporting that different outlets have been doing. So it's kind of hard for the FBI to sort of now follow some of these communications, because they've now changed it. It's not, they're not communicating through the same methods as they were before, Don.
All right. Thank you, Shimon. Thank you, Pamela. Appreciate your reporting. I want to bring in now John Fredericks, a syndicated talk radio host and the former co-chair and spokesman for the Trump campaign in Virginia. Timothy O'Brien is here, executive editor of Bloomberg View and the author of Trump Nation, The Art of Being the Donald. Michael Isikoff, the chief investigative correspondent for Yahoo News. CNN political commentator Bakari Sellers, and CNN national security analyst Juliette Cayenne. A lot to unpack. Michael, you first. So Pamela Brown, Evan Perez reporting tonight, along with Shimon Prokupecz tonight, that the FBI has information indicating that associates of the president communicated with suspected Russian operatives, and it may have been to coordinate the release of information to damage Hillary Clinton. What's your reaction to this in light of everything else that we have learned this week and in light of Director Comey's testimony on Monday?
Well, look, on the one hand, this is clearly serious. This is getting ramped up to extreme levels here, I think primarily because of Director Comey's testimony, which stunned everybody, that there's an active investigation of this, and it's going back to since last July, well before the election. But on the other hand, it is exceedingly frustrating. I mean, listen to the report that Pamela just did. We don't know which associates we're talking about. We don't know what the nature of these communications were. We don't know with whom they were communicating. So there are so many unanswered questions here that you know, it is very hard to draw firm conclusions from a report like this. And I think the real danger here is, as we continue to report on matters such as this without hard answers, without hard evidence, you know, there's a danger that the public at some point may throw up its hands and say, we don't know what to make of this.
Right.
One quick point I just want to add, you know, you mentioned those four names, Stone, Manafort, Page, Michael Flynn. All of them now, given Comey's testimony, have grounds to take the Fifth Amendment when they are called to testify before Congress, which means we may not hear from any of them. And without an actual witness to testify about what happened, it's going to make it very hard to reach a resolution.
Juliet, I've heard you say many times there's also often a lot of circumstantial evidence and no smoking gun, and that no conclusion should be drawn from that. Do you believe that?
Right, and it may just be the nature of how long these cases take. They don't work on cable news time. That I think patience is warranted here, because the series of coincidences, which are no longer coincidences, I don't think you can stay with a straight face anymore, that all of these different pieces can be explained away by, you know, leaks and the mean people, you know, who don't like Donald Trump. So just 2 points off of Michael very quickly. The first is, yes, what he said about the four witnesses potentially pleading the Fifth. I think it is very likely that one of them will not plead the Fifth. I think if one of them happened to lie to the FBI, if their story changed, if there's information about them, there will be a deal that the FBI will offer. That's often how these cases unfold. It may be Flynn, it may be Manafort, it may be Page, probably less likely Page. But we should be looking out for that. That is what I suspect is the next shoe to drop. Another key point that came out on Monday that is relevant now I think to the Manafort story. Comey offered voluntarily, unprompted, this note. He said that the intelligence community and the FBI do not recognize a distinction between government and non-government agents in Russia. In other words, they view the oligarchs, all of them supported by Putin, all of them rich because of him, as essentially agents of the state.
Okay.
So it may not be that we have ties to Russia's government, but that there are ties through the oligarchy system that they're looking at.
I want to hear from a Trump supporter now, because, John, you're a staunch defender of the president. Are you concerned that there's so many of these unexplained ties between people close to him and Russia? Do you want more answers?
Well, look, I think this investigation, Don, has gone on for 9 months. It's like having a baby. They have no information, not one scintilla of proof on anything. James Clapper's already said there's no collusion. But here's the bottom line on some of these people, like Paul Manafort. When this campaign started, Paul Manafort didn't know Donald Trump. Donald Trump didn't know Paul Manafort. If Paul Manafort got into a taxi cab in Midtown Manhattan and jumped into Donald Trump's lap and called him daddy, he wouldn't know who the guy is. So he had no contact with any of these people. He hired him to do a job. He was with the campaign about 6 weeks. I can tell you that I was with the campaign, Don, from day one.
Listen, with that, he wouldn't hire him to be his campaign manager. I mean, at some point.
Well, he hired him as a campaign manager for 8 weeks. When allegations came out, he fired him. And I can tell you this: I talked to Corey Lewandowski every day for 18 months, and after Manafort, I talked to the campaign Kellyanne Conway or David Bossie any day. I never talked to Paul Manafort one time.
What does that mean?
He had very little involvement. I don't know what it means.
He had very little involvement with you, John. But I mean, if we can go, hold on, we can go back from interview to interview here on this network with Paul Manafort talking about his influence in the campaign, and Trump's people and Trump himself talking about how influential Paul Manafort was with the campaign. I mean, maybe he didn't speak with you as a radio personality or someone who in Virginia who helped with the campaign, but that doesn't mean that he didn't have involvement in the campaign, or he didn't have...
Well, Don, he was a campaign manager for a short period of time, and as soon as these allegations came out, the day they came out, Trump fired him.
You sound just like Sean Spicer.
Well, you know what? Because Sean Spicer is telling the truth. I mean, the truth is going to set you free. This guy, as soon as Donald Trump found out what was going on about Paul Manafort, allegedly, he fired him. I don't know what else you could ask him to do.
It did not happen that quickly. And here is Sean Spicer, what he said about Paul Manafort.
There's been discussion of Paul Manafort, who played a very limited role for a very limited amount of time. Paul was hired to oversee the campaign's delegate operation. He had played a significant role in the convention and delegate operations of 4 previous Republican nominees: Bob Dole, former Presidents George H.W. Bush, Ronald Reagan, and Gerald Ford.
So, Bakari, you were here with us for the entirety of the campaign. Did Paul Manafort serve for a limited period of time and had limited influence in this campaign?
I appreciate not only the guest here tonight, but Sean Spicer attempting to spin this, but the problem is that the evidence is mounting up in greater numbers than simply Paul Manafort. I mean, Americans aren't stupid. We know that Paul Manafort was the campaign manager, so to say that he was some incidental figure is just is spinning at best and lying at worst. But that doesn't help explain Michael Flynn, that doesn't help explain Carter Page, and that doesn't help explain Roger Stone. And so when you have all of these ties to Russia, when you have this mounting evidence, which is, I mean, it is circumstantial to his point, you just can't ignore it, though. And I think that what Donald Trump, what his supporters, what his surrogates would actually be beneficial in doing is actually putting the country first for once. And I love when right-wing radio hosts like to talk about patriotism but then not implement it. I think that we need to be patriots, all Democrats and Republicans, and ask for a special prosecutor or an independent investigator to come in and look at this. This isn't about me versus you, D versus R, white or black or anything else. This is about a foreign country and agents of a foreign country attempting to undermine our democracy. Nothing more, nothing less. We should take it seriously and stop playing politics.
It is not just Manafort, and you mentioned some of the other names, Bakari, but Kellyanne Conway claims that President Trump doesn't know and didn't work with 2 of his presidential campaign advisors, Carter Page and J.D. Gordon, who have also been linked to Russia. Listen to this.
You raise a very excellent point, which is in the case of Mr. Page, Mr. Gordon, some others, that they really have very attenuated contacts to the campaign that I managed for the last 3 months. I've spoken directly with the president and other senior officials about this. He doesn't know these gentlemen. He didn't work with them. Sean Spicer, our press secretary, addressed this at length in his briefing yesterday, and he's absolutely right. There are others who were more involved with the campaign who seem to be of interest. But again, where is the nexus? I mean, people are so quick to make that nexus.
But let's play what President Trump said to the Washington Post editorial board about his campaign advisors last March.
We heard you might be announcing your foreign policy advisory team soon. If there's anything you can share on that.
We are going to be doing that. In fact, very soon. I'd say during the week we'll be announcing some names. It'll always grow.
Any that you can start off with this morning with us?
Well, you know, I hadn't thought in terms of doing it. If you want, I could give you some of the names. I wouldn't
be delighted.
I wouldn't mind. Waleed Ferris, who you probably know, PhD, advisor to the House of Representatives caucus, and is a counterterrorism expert. Carter Page, PhD. George Papadopoulos, he's an oil and energy consultant, excellent guy. The Honorable Joe Schmitz, Inspector General, Department of Defense. Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, and I have quite a few more.
So that, Kellyanne Conway said attenuated, relationships with the campaign, but out of all the names, he said Carter Page. This is at the beginning of the interview, Carter Page.
Yeah, but I don't think that Donald Trump was ever deeply informed about foreign policy to begin with, and I think in an interview with an editorial board, he could have simply been pulling names out of his hat. One of the things that we're forgetting here, however, is that a lot of this attention on Russia was invited by the president himself. During the campaign, he invited Russian hackers to take a look at Hillary Clinton. He has openly, for over a year, praised the way that Vladimir Putin has operated in Eastern Europe and presided over Russia. So it's not just his advisors who are at issue here. It's Trump's own statements that invited this kind of scrutiny. And some of it, I think, is because he's cavalier with the facts. I think he's never been a student of foreign policy, and he's gotten in over his head repeatedly whenever he comments, whether it's North Korea or Russia. The place he finds himself in now is all of the grandstanding he did on Russia during the campaign has come home to haunt him. Mm-hmm. And they're going to have to answer that. His advisors are going to have to answer it. And then there are real issues.
Well, and you say that because it's a fork in the road. When you look at the health care bill, who knows if it's going to get passed. My gut is that it will, but it's going to take a lot of deal making to do, because his words have come back to haunt him. He said he was going to do one thing, repeal and replace. He's going to make it better. Everyone will be covered. So far, that's not happening, and people, the Freedom Caucus, they don't like some parts of it. Moderates don't like other parts of it. So the clouds are circling. And if you look at the new Quinnipiac poll, President Trump's approval rating is at 37%. Does he understand the danger now of his presidency, and because of these false claims, you think, and his words?
Well, I think the rubber will meet the road on Donald Trump's presidency around the economy and jobs. I think his base may not care a whit about Russian allegations or some of the other things that have been front and center for the media and for the Congress. Yeah. But they will care about whether or not the government can deliver services they want, like health care, and whether or not Trump can deliver on his job promises, and he's going to be sorely pressed on both counts.
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal, who's been supportive of his candidacy and agenda, says President Trump has a credibility problem and is on the verge of being a fake president. That's from the Washington Post. Thank you, panel. I appreciate it. Thanks for the conversation. We come right back. The Intelligence Committee member who says we need an independent commission to investigate the Russia connection.
Tell us.
Well, Anderson, the Republican chairman of the House Intelligence Committee shocked everyone by showing up here at the White House for a meeting directly with the president, saying he had new information. Well, he didn't bother to explain what that was to other members of the Intelligence Committee, Democrats particularly there. He did brief a few Republicans there, but he stood outside the West lobby of the West Wing of the White House shortly after he met with the president, and he said this.
Justice Department doesn't have anything to do with this.
So
this is information. This is information that was brought to me that I thought the president needed to know about incidental collection, where the president himself and others in the Trump transition team were clearly put into intelligence reports that ended up at this White House and across a whole bunch of other agencies. And I thought it was important for the president to know this. That's why I briefed the speaker this morning, and I came down here as soon as I could.
Now, it's important to point out he is leading an investigation into an entirely separate branch of government here. So the sheer idea of him coming down to share information certainly raised a ton of eyebrows. Yes, he was on the he was a supporter of the president. He worked on his a campaign committee and transition committee, which isn't all that unusual, but the sheer fact that he showed up here certainly raises questions about his objectivity, and now tonight is throwing the entire investigation up in the air potentially.
And while the president, earlier said he felt partially vindicated, clearly with that tweet tonight, it sounds like he's, feeling even more vindicated. I mean, others are saying the timing and the presentation of the information itself is suspect.
The timing is very interesting indeed. I mean, look what else is going on today. It seems like, several hours have, several different things have happened, of course, but the Democrats simply say that they were blindsided by this, that this simply, was coming out of left field entirely. So the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, he had this to say after digesting all of this.
And unfortunately, I think the actions of today throw great doubt into the ability of both the chairman and the committee to conduct the investigation the way it ought to be conducted.
So the question is now, what is coming after this? Now, Democrats, of course, will be calling for an independent investigation. Republicans control the House, so that is not likely to happen. But there is a separate investigation happening altogether here. And the Senate Intelligence Committee did not want to come anywhere near this, it seemed today. They are doing their own investigation. The FBI is also investigating separately. So the fact that this looked like a lifeline for the White House may not be as long of one as they had hoped. All these investigations still underway tonight, despite all of this, Anderson.
Jeff Zeleny, thanks very much. Much more now with our panel. In this incarnation, CNN political analyst Kirsten Powers, Daily Beast senior columnist Matt Lewis, Christine Quinn is back with us as well as Hill contributor and Trump supporter Kayleigh McEnany. Kirsten, I mean, there's so many things to talk about today, but just on this, what do you make of Nunes going over to the White House, what he actually has said, and the president saying it's a partial vindication?
I mean, I think it's honestly the way he's handling it is a little shady. If he had this information that really was that important, then he should have shared it with the rest of the people on the committee, at a bare minimum with Congressman Schiff, and I think that would have a lot more credibility had he done that. I also think if you look at what he's actually alleging here, you know, he's saying that this was all legal, that it was incidental. It's not really vindicating Donald Trump, because Donald Trump had actually accused the president of wiretapping.
Right, and Nunes said several times, say, this does not, that in no way is there any evidence that President Obama...
Yeah, and then the other thing that I think is concerning is the fact that Donald Trump had said on Tucker Carlson's show, some information is going to be coming out. And now
Sean Spicer reiterated that.
Yeah, and now this information is coming out. So how did, and we don't know how Congressman Nunes got this information. So there are a lot of questions that need to be answered here.
Matt, is it shady?
Took all my points. I think exactly. Great minds think alike. I think Kirsten's exactly right on that. Donald Trump said that Obama wiretapped him in Trump Tower. This was not. It was incidental, which means that they were not targeting Donald Trump or his administration or his transition team. But I think, look, this really calls into question, this serious question, the objectivity and the independence of this congressional investigation. I mean, I think that if I were the chairman of this, you know, if I found out this information, my first move would be to go to the ranking member and say, hey, we've got this. How do you think we should handle it? Should we hold a press conference? Should we alert the other committee members? Should we go to the White House and inform the president? He didn't do any of that. He unilaterally did this. And whether or not there's anything fishy, it creates the appearance of impropriety.
But I think you're really missing the forest for the trees here. You know, my Democratic counterparts and my Republican counterparts are concerned at the process by which Devin Nunes relayed this information. None of us are talking about the substance of what he is saying. If it is true, and we have no reason to doubt Chairman Nunes, he is a credible person. If it is true that U.S. citizens were spied on.
No, you didn't say spied.
They were... The procedures, let me get on the
Let her finish.
Please let me get the facts out.
Okay, but let her finish.
In the course of surveying foreign agents, they stumbled upon U.S. citizens who were talking about Donald Trump's family, who were talking about Donald Trump's plans for the administration. That was reported on CNN. So they stumbled upon this conversation. At that point, go read D&I procedures. You stop what you're doing. You do not read any further. Instead of stopping what they were doing, they unmasked the name of that person and disseminated this information about government. Maybe you guys don't think that Fourth Amendment rights apply to people who have an R behind their name, but they certainly do, and that is the substance of this. And the fact that the left isn't outraged over this, it's not only hypocritical, it's deeply disturbing to a democratic society.
Well, what you just put out are not actually the facts as we know them from the information.
They're according to CNN the facts.
No. What the Congress member said, and on one of the earlier segments, a very high-ranking former CIA and FBI officer conveyed and clarified, was that this was allowed, court-ordered, looking into foreign agents, in the course of which happens all the time in different investigations. The person they're watching or listening to has a conversation or an interaction with somebody else. It happens constantly. No. I let you finish. I let you finish. I didn't want to, but I did, so you have to now. So then they identified these other people, and they identified them as American 1, 2, and 3, as is the same way that happens with district attorneys and U.S. attorneys. And then, as an easy procedure, they asked to unmask them. That is all fully allowed and is completely different than the president saying the former president illegally wiretapped
Can you
them.
tell me what the legal qualification for unmasking is? It's committing a crime or having credible intelligence. What crime was committed by the Donald Trump
do we know enough about who was unmasked and what the nature of the conversation was to say whether or not the unmasking was appropriate or not?
According to Devin Nunes, it was not appropriate. He has no information indicating these individuals were committing a crime.
But that doesn't mean they weren't.
Does it raise any questions to you that Devin Nunes, who is chairman of this committee, which is supposed to be impartial and supposed to be actually investigating potentially people in the White House would not only first make a public statement, but then go to the very people perhaps that are being investigated with information?
Well, they're being investigated for something different. The collusion with Russians is part of this investigation. What is also part of this investigation is the leaking of information. Right. And what is also part of this information is now the spying of U.S. citizens. And I think Devin Nunes had a fair answer. The Obama administration was aware of this. It is completely within President Trump's rights to know if he
Matt,
or his associates
This is damaging.
were being
This is damaging if you're a Republican.
Right.
And you want to keep this from becoming a select committee or an independent prosecutor. What you need to do is preserve, hopefully not the illusion, but hopefully the actual integrity of this process. And I think that what Representative Nunes did, Chairman Nunes did today, undermines that.
Right, you now have John McCain saying, look, there should be a select
Matt,
we need to believe in separation of powers.
I'm
separation of
confused,
powers.
though.
This makes it look like
Why are you more concerned about the process than the substance of his claims? Are you concerned at all that
I don't think that they were spying on Donald Trump. I think that...
So you think Devin Nunes lied?
I think that there was...
He didn't say that they were spying on Donald Trump.
No, on U.S. citizens.
But not Donald Trump.
It doesn't matter if it's Donald Trump. A U.S. citizen has Fourth Amendment rights.
But you just
Right,
said...
but he's not saying that they were spying on
to
U.S.
believe
citizens.
the Congress member confirmed that. He did not.
He confirmed Donald Trump associates. U.S.
How do we know that we don't even know who his source is. How do we even...
Maybe this panel...
I'm just supposed to take his word?
Maybe this panel does not know about the Fourth Amendment. No, you have rights in this country.
Right, but Devin Nunes...
I like all of them. I like even like the Second Amendment.
It also, I mean, so for a full picture, Devin Nunes was on the transition team for President Trump.
Yeah. This just isn't how you handle it if you want to be seen on the up and up. It just isn't. It's so unusual. And I mean, and you're down there, Kayleigh, so outraged about everything. You're not outraged over the fact that he went to the White House before he even went to the other person on the committee with him that he's supposed to be doing investigations with. And you just also keep saying that Americans were being spied on, and that's not what happened. If something is but that's not spying.
Well, by the way, there's only supposedly one unmasking. We don't know, but from
Mike Flynn and others. That was confirmed today.
We don't know the circumstances around why they were unmasked, but at the end of the day, that's not spying. Spying would have been targeting them, and they weren't targeted. It was they were caught incidentally. Kayleigh, seriously, you really need to stop with telling us that we don't care about the laws. That's just not.
But you're acting as if I have faux outrage that a private conversation about Trump's family.
I didn't say it was fake outrage. I think you have legitimate outrage.
Around government. Does it concern you at all that a private conversation was widely disseminated around government? Does it concern you?
If it was done improperly, yes. If there was no reason to do it, but we don't know what happened. We don't know what the circumstances of that were. And I'm not saying you have fake outrage. I think your outrage is legitimate. I'm just saying you don't have similar outrage over other things, like, for example, the accusations against the Trump administration, or Donald Trump and other people.
Which there's no evidence of. We actually have evidence here. We have credible evidence that Mike Flynn's identity was not only unmasked, it was leaked to the Washington Post, a private U.S. citizen's conversation.
Do you find that, I mean, are you as outraged about Russian hacking during the election and the dissemination of emails and your candidate, Donald Trump, saying, I love WikiLeaks, and reading out all this information from these emails?
I sat on this very panel and I said an attack on the United States doesn't matter, Democrat, Republican, an attack on the DNC is an attack on the RNC, it's an attack on America. I said that, but I'm very concerned that my Democratic counterparts don't seem to care about the Constitution, don't seem to care about the Fourth Amendment, and they are the ones selectively outraged. I sat on this panel and professed outrage.
With all due respect, no one here has trashed the Fourth Amendment. No, we have not, Kayleigh, A. And B,
it's a pretty cheap way of arguing, I would say, to Kayleigh, to call into question the people on this panel, our belief in the Constitution.
Because we're so concerned on this panel at the process, Devin Nunes, because this is the argument of the panel, how dare Devin Nunes go to the White House before the Democrats, not how dare U.S. citizens were unmasked and their identities leaked to the Washington Post in the private contents of their conversation in the case of Mike Flynn.
My position right now that I'm most concerned about is that you are putting out misinformation.
It's not misinformation.
American citizens, we have no evidence they were spied on. It was collateral intelligence.
For client overseas. This time, the former client is a Russian oligarch. The FBI is investigating Mr. Manafort's possible ties to Russia, some of which involve his work for the ousted pro-Russian president of Ukraine. Tonight, fresh accusations and pushback from the man in question. CNN senior investigative journalist Drew Griffin has the latest.
The latest connection between a close Trump associate and Russia was dug up by the Associated Press, reporting a 2005 memo in which Paul Manafort, already working for a Russian billionaire named Oleg Deripaska, was pitching a plan to greatly benefit the Putin government. Manafort confirmed to CNN he did work for Oleg Deripaska, but he rejects the Associated Press interpretation that he was pushing the political interests of Vladimir Putin, including, to quote, influence politics, business dealings, and news coverage inside the United States. I have always publicly acknowledged that I worked for Mr. Deripaska and his company, Rusal, to advance its interests, Manafort told CNN through a spokesman, adding, I did not work for the Russian government. Once again, Manafort writes, smear and innuendo are being used to paint a false picture. A spokesman for Deripaska told CNN Manafort provided investment consulting services but declined to provide any additional details. Manafort and his Russian billionaire had a major falling out. Court documents show Deripaska funneled nearly $19 million into a Manafort business venture registered in the Cayman Islands in 2007. They invested in a Ukrainian telecom company. But the deal went south, and according to a legal filing, Deripaska's company said Manafort simply disappeared. White House spokesman Sean Spicer this afternoon downplaying any connection this has to the president.
He was a consultant. He had clients from around the world. There is no suggestion that he did anything improper but to suggest that the president knew who his clients were from a decade ago is a bit insane. He was hired to do a job. He did it. That's it, plain and simple.
It's just the latest Russian headline headache for the Trump administration. CNN has reported the FBI is already investigating possible connections between Trump campaign officials, including Manafort, and Russian officials. Manafort was fired by the Trump campaign on August 19th. That was the same day the FBI announced Manafort was involved in another investigation and another possible connection to Russia. This time it was his consulting work for the pro-Russian former president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, who eventually had to flee his own country, seeking refuge in Russia with Vladimir Putin. The government of Ukraine opened an investigation into possible corruption and money laundering charges against Yanukovych and his political party after Manafort's name appeared on a ledger of $12.7 million in secret payments. Manafort denies he ever took money illegally from anyone in his worldwide consulting business. He denies he pushed any Russian agenda while working in Ukraine. And he now denies that connection with a Russian billionaire had anything to do with a plan to enrich Russian President Vladimir Putin. Anderson, Paul Manafort is not granting interviews right now, but he did tell us through a statement this afternoon that he looks forward to meeting with those conducting
out of the vehicle and stabbed a police officer before he was shot to death. Our chief international correspondent, Christiane Amanpour, is on the scene tonight. She joins us with the latest. Christiane, you spoke to members of parliament as they were able to finally leave today. What did they tell you about what they witnessed?
Well, it's incredible. You know, they were under lock and key for hours and hours, and as we were broadcasting live, suddenly everybody started filing out. Hundreds of them started filing out, and we grabbed a few of them and talked to them. And one member of parliament told me that, you know, they were on the way to voting. They were moving underground. They had these underground connecting tunnels between parts of the building. And MPs were on the way to voting when all of a sudden they saw other members coming at them from a different part of the building and telling them to go back, go back. They had heard these shots ring out. And so they all went back. They went back to their offices. They sort of locked down some of them who could get to their offices. Others were forced to lock down until they were told that, you know, it's under control, but you still have to stay in. So it was very scary for them, but they paid tribute to the incredible professionalism of the police on the gate. If that police contingent hadn't been fully deployed and fully alert, this would have potentially been a lot worse. But the police are getting huge kudos here for their very, very quick and complete response to this incident.
You also spoke to a former counterterrorism official. I'm wondering what they told you. I mean, you know, does this bear the hallmarks of an ISIS or ISIS-inspired attack? Any idea on it?
Well, you know, the police have now said formally that while they believe they know who the attacker is, they are not releasing his name, and they have not yet said his motive, except they have said they are treating it as an Islamist-inspired attack. So that is what they're treating it as. And what we've been talking to counterterrorism officials about is the style of this. In a nutshell, it's a low-tech, high-impact terror attack, the likes of which we saw in Nice, in Berlin, which is a car, and in this case, and a knife, that causes enormous amount of damage and terror. We've got, apparently, according to officials, now 40 injured. The death toll stands at this point at 5. That means including the policeman who was killed and the assailant who was killed. But some injuries are catastrophic. But people are just thanking God, thanking response, thanking everything, that it wasn't much worse than it actually turned out to be.
And Britain's Prime Minister Theresa May said that the fact that Parliament was chosen as a target, that's no accident.
It's no accident, Anderson. They chose.
U.S. officials told us FBI Director James Comey made his bombshell announcement, as you'll recall, Monday before Congress that the FBI is investigating the Trump campaign's ties to Russia. So the FBI is now reviewing this information, which includes human intelligence, travel, business, and phone records, as well as accounts of in-person meetings, according to the officials we've spoken with. And the information is raising the suspicions of FBI counterintelligence investigators that the coordination may have taken place, though officials we've spoken with cautioned that this information was not conclusive and that this investigation is ongoing. The FBI would not comment, nor would the White House, though Trump officials have denied there is any evidence of collusion, Anderson.
So, I mean, Evan, this gives more insight into what Director Comey knew when he spoke on Monday.
Well, that's right, Anderson. If you recall, in addition to Comey saying that the investigation includes looking at connections of Trump associates, he also explained what it means that the investigation is actually being done. Take a listen.
Don't you need some action or some information besides just attending a meeting, having been paid to attend a conference, that a picture was taken, or that you traveled to a country before you're open to investigation for counterintelligence by the FBI?
The standard is, I think there's a couple different at play, a credible allegation of wrongdoing or a reasonable basis to believe that an American may be acting as an agent of a foreign power.
One law enforcement official said that the information in hand suggests, quote, people connected to the campaign were in contact, and it appeared that they were giving the thumbs up to release information when it was ready. But other U.S. officials who we spoke to said it's premature to draw that inference from the information that they've gathered so far, since at this point it's largely circumstantial. The FBI cannot yet prove that collusion actually took place, but the information suggesting collusion is now a large part of the focus of this investigation, according to the officials we've talked to.
And Pamela, what sort of coordination is under investigation?
So we're told mostly the FBI is focused on the stolen and published emails by WikiLeaks, including the DNC and Clinton's campaign's John Podesta. Now, U.S. officials said the information being investigated was not drawn from the leaked dossier of unverified information compiled by that former British intelligence official, compiled for Trump's political opponents, though the dossier also suggested coordination between Trump campaign associates and Russian operatives, Anderson.
So, Evan, do we know who's being investigated?
Well, the sources we talked to would not say who was connected, these people who are connected to Trump that are being investigated here, but we do know that the FBI was already investigating 4 former Trump campaign associates, Michael Flynn, Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, and Carter Page, for contacts with Russians known to U.S. intelligence. Now, all 4 of those people have denied improper contacts. And Anderson, one of the interesting things is that we have some obstacles now in the way of the FBI investigation. The FBI is facing the fact that, trying to find this conclusive evidence, they're facing the fact that communication between Trump's associates and these Russians has ceased in recent months, given all the public focus on these Russia ties in the Trump campaign. And then some of these Russian officials have also changed their methods of communications, making monitoring that much more difficult, according to the officials that we talked to.
All right, Evan, Pam, thanks very much. I want to bring in our panel, political analyst Maggie Haberman and Carl Bernstein. She's a New York Times White House correspondent. He's a legendary Watergate journalist and author. Also CNN counterterrorism analyst Phil Mudd, formerly a senior official of the FBI and CIA, and CNN political director David Chalian. So Maggie, I mean, you just heard that reporting would certainly seem to underscore why the FBI is investigating coordination between the Trump campaigns and Russians known to U.S. intelligence.
Yeah, it continues to suggest, I think two things are happening. I think that that information suggests that there is a basis for what the FBI is doing, why they are trying to get to what was at the heart of these contacts. We still don't know what they were. It also, the second piece of it is that as you have sort of a chess game going on where you have Nunez from the House committee, the Republican chairman, tell reporters today that actually there is some intelligence that suggests that Trump campaign aides may have been intercepted in ways that Trump had suggested, as if this was ordered by President Obama, which he had contended. We now get more information about the Russia aspect of it. I think that the Russia question remains unsolved. It is still not clear, I think, what exactly we're looking at, the scope of this. We know the figures who were involved and that they are looking at communications and travel, it sounds like, in meetings, which we basically knew. But this is becoming a low-grade fever that shows no sign of breaking for this administration. And that's very challenging as you go on, either in a campaign or in an administration where you are trying to do something legislative and you have this going on. This White House has a habit of creating all kinds of self-inflicted wounds. Without this is deeply troubling for them.
Yeah, David, whether it's a low-grade fever, as Maggie describes, or kind of the drip, drip, drip of information coming out, how significant is this information we're learning tonight? Again, there's been plenty of smoke before, still no fire.
Right. We all know, as the FBI director said on Monday, this investigation is about looking into possible coordination. That's the ball game here at the end of the day. Whether or not there's there, Anderson, means whether or not there's provable coordination between the Trump campaign and Russian associates to help him win and defeat Hillary Clinton. So this reporting is a step in that direction. So it's certainly not good for the Trump administration. But, you know, both President Trump and Sean Spicer, as recently as Monday again, have been asked this question directly about whether or not they were aware, if President Trump was aware of any of his associates during the campaign talking to Russian officials. He's on record saying, no, not at all. He's on record saying Paul Manafort's denied it, and then he just went on to say, the president did say, Russia's a ruse. So
you know what, actually, David, let me play that Sean Spicer saying that just for our viewers.
Does the president, now that we know that there is an ongoing investigation by the FBI, does the president stand by his comments that he's not aware of any contacts that his campaign associates had with Russia during the election?
Yes.
Okay, and then the second one is, has anyone from the White House...
Well, can I just amend the first?
Sure.
Obviously, just to be clear, I know that I'm trying to think through this for a second because obviously General Flynn, right. But again, right, and I'm not aware of any at this time, but even General Flynn was a volunteer of the campaign. And then obviously there's been this discussion of Paul Manafort, who played a very limited role for a very limited amount of time. But beyond, hey, Jonathan, hold on. Can you stop interrupting other people's questions? Okay, Jonathan, somebody's asking a question. It's not your press briefing. Julie's asking a question. Please calm down. Julie.
Are you saying then that the president is aware of contacts that Manafort...
No, nothing that hasn't been previously discussed. I just don't want to make it look like we're not aware of the stuff that's been...
I mean, David, you know, it is telling that they are distancing themselves from the former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, saying, you know, he had a very limited role for a very limited amount of time. I mean, he was everywhere.
There's no doubt about that. They're trying to erase a 5-month period of the campaign where he was actually, for a big chunk of that time, running the show, Anderson. But what you heard there from Sean, it said nothing that hasn't already been discussed. Well, here we are, new reporting tonight, hasn't been discussed before, and it's about alleging potential coordination here. And so this is going to continue to ask the question, as Maggie was saying, in terms of the low-grade fever, you're going to continue to have the question asked to the White House. So what exactly did the president know? When did he know it, or his closest aides?
Phil, if you, I mean, you worked in both FBI and CIA. If you were part of the FBI investigation, this was the information you were seeing, what would your next move be?
First of all, we got to slow down here. The FBI director has announced the investigation. I would be telling the counterintelligence guys, take your time. When this one goes public, regardless of whether the FBI decides to bring charges or not, this is going to be picked over even more than the Clinton email investigation. So if you're in a leadership position, the first thing you got to do is cross every T. This is not about whether we have suspicions of contacts. This is about whether you can prove that in a court of law. The second thing we haven't talked about Anderson, and let me be clear on this. This is not simply about whether there was contact or collusion between Trump officials and the Russians. If you're inside the Bureau, this is about whether someone lied to a federal officer during the investigation. That is, there were contacts, whether they are illegal or not, and they told the federal investigator something else. Inside the Bureau, that'll tick people off, and furthermore, that is a federal violation.
Right. You can't lie to the FBI as a crime.
You can't do it. So you would be looking both at the facts of the case, and they're still murky, and what people have said along the way and whether their stories are changing.
Carl, I mean, for you, what new questions does tonight's reporting raise, and certainly nothing, I guess, that'll be answered in an open hearing?
Well, I've been saying for a while that there's a cover-up going on here, and the cover-up is among those who worked in the Trump campaign and associates of Trump, and it's now becoming much more clear what it is that they have been concealing, which are these contacts, and which revolve around leaked emails from Podesta's account. So the questions that I would want to know is actually of the White House. Why cannot the President of the United States and Sean Spicer and others, instead of pushing back against these investigations, say, we want to get to the bottom of this. We want to open up everything. I, the President of the United States, want to call these people in and ask them what happened, what is this all about? What we're seeing is pushback, smoke screens, an attempt to keep away from what really happened here by the President of the United States, by Sean Spicer, and that raises a whole set of additional questions.
Maggie, I mean, it's not just, the smoke screens, it's also diversions, shiny objects, allegations against other people, allegations against the Clinton campaign having contacts with Russia. It's going to be interesting to see how President Trump or Sean Spicer respond to this latest reporting, if in fact they do. I mean, they pointed out before that former DNI Clapper said he didn't see any conclusive intelligence that there was coordination. Clapper himself has since clarified he was referring to before January 20th, and obviously the investigation is still ongoing.
I think it was about a week and a half ago that Sean Spicer said, you know, we'll have nothing further to say on this topic. He wasn't talking about Russia, but he was talking about the president's allegation of surveillance against him, either as a candidate or during the transition. These two things have been tethered together, and Spicer has continued to comment on it in basically every briefing, including today, where he read a litany of allegations and related facts about the Clintons. The election is over, and so at a certain point, I think it is going to be really hard for the White House to keep trying to pivot to either, you know, a vanquished candidate or the media is out to get us. At a certain point, they are either going to have to say, to Carl's point, I think it's a really important one, the president has not expressed much concern or worry that a foreign entity may have meddled, did meddle, according to the intelligence community, in the election that he won. He sees it as delegitimizing, and therefore he never addresses it that way. But there is a broader problem here, and the White House has both been undisciplined about this and has had contradictory messages.
It's also interesting, Maggie, because, I mean, the president, Sean Spicer, have talked about the importance of investigating leaks. So if they certainly have not shown the same enthusiasm for trying to get to the bottom. I think Sean Spicer, generally his comments have been along the lines of, well, if they want to do that, go ahead.
Right. The leaks are very, very frustrating and consuming to the West Wing. They are personally grating and troubling to the president. I've heard from several people. My colleague Glenn Thrush has heard the same thing. And they are finding a way to deal with it. Some of this is the newness of this president in a government and a leaky bureaucracy that he cannot control. He's used to having full control as a businessman and as a candidate. And some of this is just that the information is not a great fact set for them, and they have not figured out how to deal with it.
You were saying
Anderson,
newness, not a pun on Devin Nunes, I assume. But yes, sorry, Carl.
That the heroes, and I don't want to draw the Watergate analogy substantively here, but the heroes of Watergate were really Republicans. They were Republicans in the House and the Senate who wanted this investigated to the bottom. What did the president know and when did he know it, as was stated by the Republican Senator Howard Baker from Tennessee? That's what we're not seeing here. We're not seeing it from the Republicans on the Hill either, who are consumed by supposedly looking for leaks. Many of the same Republicans decrying the leaks are those who have leaked classified information themselves on numerous occasions, which I'm sure Maggie, others on our panel tonight can attest to. I certainly can. Look at the Benghazi inquiry of and what was leaked there. So these smoke screens, instead of us hearing that we want to get to the bottom of this from Republicans, not just the White House, is becoming very conspicuous.
We're going to have more with the panel coming up, though. The breaking news on what, to Carl's point, the lead Republican on the House Intelligence Committee did today that's raising a lot of eyebrows. What the chairman did that left some jaws on the floor, not just eyebrows raised, and while the ranking Democrat on that same committee said the chairman took, quote, a wrecking ball to the idea that the committee, the Chairman Devin Nunes, didn't hold his normal joint press conference alongside the ranking Democrat on the committee, Adam Schiff. Instead, he faced cameras alone and made what sure sounded like a startling revelation.
On numerous occasions, the intelligence community incidentally collected information about U.S. citizens involved in the Trump transition.
What's more, he said, some of those names were unmasked and suggests that it was done improperly. Now, later turns out that he made that announcement without telling Congressman Schiff anything about it, nor had he shown anyone on the committee the evidence that he says he saw. Then at the White House, Press Secretary Sean Spicer was asked about what Chairman Nunes had said and essentially said, well, it's all news to him.
There's a lot of questions that I think his statement raises, and I hope that we can continue to get to the bottom of. But right now, we're not there yet. I think that there are a series of questions that need to get answered as to what happened, why it happened, and hopefully we will be able to share more with you going forward.
Then, a short time later, Chairman Nunes appeared at the White House and briefed the president and then made sure to step in front of the cameras on his way out, suggesting something was very, very wrong.
This is information that was brought to me that I thought the president needed to know about incidental collection, where the president himself and others in the Trump transition team were clearly put into intelligence reports that ended up at this White House and across a whole bunch of other agencies. And I thought it was important for the president to know this. That's why I briefed the speaker this morning, and I came down here as soon as I could.
Then, just minutes later, this from the president when asked if he felt vindicated.
Do you feel vindicated by Chairman Nunes?
I somewhat do. I must tell you, I somewhat do. I very much appreciated the fact that they found what they found, but I somewhat do.
Now, to Democrats, the timing of all this seemed questionable, to say the least, and it also threw new light on something Sean Spicer said just yesterday.
Can we expect the president to this week present evidence that he was wiretapped by Barack Obama, or will he speak about it? Because he didn't mention it last night in his rally in Kentucky.
Right. Well, let's see how the week goes.
Okay, so there's that, the odd timing of it all, and the fact that the chairman of what's supposed to be an independent committee investigating Russia and individuals in the Trump campaign, possibly having connections, that chairman would have hustled over to the White House to talk to people who may be under investigation about what may be classified information. But even beyond questions about appropriateness and the timing, there's also the question, does this really partially vindicate the president for his tweets accusing President Obama of wiretapping him and being bad or sick? The president certainly seemed to want you to think it did vindicate him, at least partially. But keep him honest, if, as Democrats suggest, Chairman Nunes was giving the president cover, it certainly wasn't on that.
The president said that President Obama tapped his phone.
No. That did not happen. I've said this for many, many weeks, including the day after, a couple days after, in front of the press. That never happened. I think the wiretapping, if you use it generally, like the president has said, he clearly, used it differently than what I think a lot of people took it, which was, did Obama actually wiretap Trump Tower, which we know didn't happen. I think the president's been pretty clear on that.
But the physical act of wiretapping, do you see anything in the information?
No, and I said that on day 2.
President Trump said that he felt somewhat vindicated by what you told him today. Just to be clear, there's still no evidence that President Trump himself was wiretapped.
That is correct. That is correct.
So, as you might imagine, there's more to the story, including a reaction from Democrats and more details from the White House. Jeff Zeleny joins us now with the latest on that. So I just said Congressman Schiff, the ranking Democrat on the Intelligence Committee, did not know about this new information until it was released publicly. He's responded now several times today.
Anderson, he has, and Congressman Schiff was very blunt about this. He said he was blindsided. He found out about it only after the Republican chairman came here to the White House to talk about this. He says it compromises this entire investigation. He was very fired up about it earlier this evening. Let's watch.
The chairman will need to decide whether he is the chairman of an independent investigation into conduct which includes allegations of potential coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russians, or he is going to act as a surrogate of the White House because he cannot do both.
So, Anderson, as you were laying out earlier, the timing of this is definitely interesting, to say the very least here. Now, the White House saw this as something of a lifeline this afternoon. However, if it sparked some type of independent investigation up on Capitol Hill, it might be a short-lived lifeline.
And the president is saying he felt partially vindicated by the findings. Do we know what the administration's next steps are going to be?
He did say he said felt somewhat vindicated. I was actually in the room there asking him that question, and he said, I was vindicated they found what they found. So I asked him, what did they find? And he didn't answer that. We still don't know what they found here. But an interesting exchange I had earlier with Sean Spicer in the White House to ask him why only the chairman has come here to the White House, the FBI director.